morning, students. Sairam. Welcome back to your English online session. Children, today we shall continue with 4.2 The Storyteller by H. Munro, known as Saki. Now, this story it revolves around three kids: small girl, smaller girl, and Cyril, who were traveling with their aunt in a train with a fellow passenger, a bachelor. Now, these children, they were irritating their aunt and the bachelor with their activities. So, to distract them, their aunt tells them a story. However, her reputation as a storyteller did not rank high in their estimation. Children, in part 1 we have completed till here. Now let us continue with the story. In a low confidential voice, interrupted at frequent intervals by loud, petulant questionings from her listeners, she began an unenterprising and deplorably uninteresting story about a little girl who was good and made friends with everyone on account of her goodness, and was finally saved from a mad bull by a number of rescuers who admired her moral character. So, children, their aunt started to tell them a story. So, when she started to tell the story, she was interrupted frequently by loud, petulant questionings. Now, children, petulant means unreasonable. Okay, unreasonable questionings from her listeners. She began an unenterprising and deplorably uninteresting story. Now, deplorably means in a very bad way. Now, the story was about a little girl who was good and she made friends with everyone on account of her goodness. And she was finally saved from a mad bull by a number of rescuers. Now, rescuers means they are the people, those who help others in those who are in difficulties or in danger. Okay, so she was saved from a mad bull by a number of rescuers who admired her moral character. So that was the story which the aunt was telling to the children. Wouldn't they have saved her if she hadn't been good? Demanded the bigger of the small girls. It was exactly the question that the bachelor had wanted to ask. Well, yes, admitted the aunt lamely. But I don't think they would have run quite so fast to help her if they had not liked her so much. So, children, immediately the bigger of the small girls, she asked her aunt the question that wouldn't they have saved her if she had been good? That was a question which was asked by the bigger of the small girls. And the same question the bachelor wanted to ask the aunt. Well, yes, admitted the aunt lamely. Now, lamely means where you are not able to persuade your listeners. Okay, you are not certain, you are not confident. So, well, yes, admitted the aunt lamely. But I don't think they would have run quite so fast to help if they had not liked her so much. So this was the answer given by aunt, which was not acceptable by the listeners. It's the stupidest story I have ever heard, said the bigger of the small girls with immense conviction. I didn't listen after the first bit. It was so stupid, said Cyril. So, children, the bigger of the small girls, what did she say? It is the stupidest story I have ever heard. She said with immense conviction. Conviction here means belief, strong belief. And what did Cyril say? He didn't listen after the first bit. So, according to them, it was the stupidest story they have ever heard. The smaller girl made no actual comment on the story, but she had long ago recommenced a murmured repetition of her favorite line. You don't seem to be a success as a storyteller. said the bachelor suddenly from his corner. So, children, according to Cyril and the bigger of the small girls, it was the stupidest story that they had ever heard. But the smaller girl, she had made no actual comment on the story. But she had long ago started murmuring her favorite line. Children, which was the favorite line? On the road to Mandalay. Now, children, hearing the story, even the bachelor, he lost his patience and he expressed his doubt over aunt's storytelling skills. So, he told her that she didn't seem to be a success as a storyteller. So, the aunt bristled in instant defense at this unexpected attack. It's a very difficult thing to tell stories that children can both understand and appreciate, she said stiffly. I don't agree with you, said the bachelor. So, children, the aunt got very angry, okay, at this unexpected attack by the bachelor. So, she said in a very strong manner that it is very difficult to tell stories to children that they can understand and appreciate. So, at this, the bachelor, he didn't agree with the aunt. Perhaps you would like to tell them a story, was the aunt's retort. Tell us a story, demanded the bigger of the small girls. Once upon a time, began the bachelor, there was a little girl called Bertha who was extraordinarily good. The children's momentarily aroused interest began at once to flicker. All stories seemed dreadfully alike, no matter who told them. So, children, here the aunt, in a quick reply, she asked the bachelor to tell them a story. So, even the bigger of the small girls, she demanded the bachelor to tell them a story. So, he started. Once upon a time, began the bachelor, there was a little girl called Bertha who was extraordinarily good. So, he started the story, okay, with once upon a time there was a little girl called Bertha. She was extraordinarily good. So the children's momentarily aroused interest began at once to flicker. So the children's interest, it began to flicker because according to them, all the stories they started like that, no matter who told them. She did all that she was told. She was always truthful. She kept her clothes clean, ate milk puddings as though they were jam tarts, learned her lessons perfectly, and was polite in her manners. Was she pretty? Asked the bigger of the small girls. So, children, this girl Bertha, she did what she was told. She was always truthful. She kept her clothes clean, ate milk puddings, learned her lessons perfectly, and was very polite in her manners. Then the bigger of the small girls asked the bachelor, was she pretty? Not as pretty as any of you, said the bachelor, but she was horribly good. There was a wave of reaction in favor of the story. The word horrible in connection with goodness was a novelty that commended itself. It seemed to introduce a ring of truth that was absent from the aunt's tale of infant life. So, children, when the bigger of the small girl asked the bachelor about Bertha, was she pretty? What was the answer given? Not as pretty as any of you, said the bachelor, but she was horribly good. But children, both these words, horrible and good. Okay, so hearing these words, there was a wave of reaction in favor of the story. The word horrible in connection with goodness was a novelty, means it was something strange, something new that commended itself, okay, that proved it was acceptable by the children. Now they were in favor of the story. It seemed to introduce a ring of truth that was absent from the aunt's tale of infant life. So it introduced a ring of truth, means it seemed to be true. So such tales they have never heard from their aunt. So here the children now they were in favor of the story which was told by the bachelor. She was so good, continued the bachelor, that she won several medals for goodness, which she always wore pinned onto her dress. There was a medal for obedience, another medal for punctuality, and a third for good behavior. They were large metal medals and they clicked against one another as she walked. No other child in the town where she lived had as many as three medals. So everybody knew that she must be an extra good child. Horribly good, quoted Cyril. So children, Bertha was so good that she won several medals for goodness, which she always wore pinned onto her dress. So there was a medal for obedience, another medal for punctuality, and a third for good behavior. And they were large metal medals. So they used to click against one another as she walked. No other child in the town where she lived had as many as three medals. So everybody knew that she must be an extra good child. Horribly good, quoted Cyril. Everybody talked about her goodness, and the prince of the country got to hear about it. And he said that as she was so very good, she might be allowed once a week to walk in his park, which was just outside the town. It was a beautiful park, and no children were ever allowed in it. So it was a great honor for Bertha to be allowed to go there. So children, she was extraordinarily good. So everyone talked about her goodness. And the prince of the country, even he got to hear about it. And as she was so good, she was allowed once a week to walk in his park, which was just outside the town. It was a very beautiful park and no children were ever allowed in it. So it was a great honor for Bertha to be allowed to go there. Were there any sheep in the park? Demanded Cyril. No, said the bachelor. There were no sheep, but there were other small, harmless animals in the park. The storyteller paused to let a full idea of the park's treasures sink into the children's imaginations. Then he resumed. So children, here Cyril, he asked the bachelor, were there any sheep in the park? No, said the bachelor. There were no sheep, but there were other small, harmless animals in the park. Then the storyteller, he stopped to let a full idea of park's treasures to sink into the children's imagination. Let they think what was there in the park. And then he resumed. That is, then he started with the story. Okay. So I hope children you have understood. We will be continuing the next part of the story in the next class. Till then, take care of yourself. Sai Ram.